Well, hello, my name is Jim Royal. Thanks very much for watching my video. I'm a huge Beatles and Elvis Presley fan, so if you haven't already, please subscribe below. In my last video, I put together a Beatles Fantasy 1970 album. And this was the idea of what if the Beatles had continued and they put out one more album that year, what would have been on it? What I had asked for is I asked for participation, and I wanted to thank everybody who put song ideas or suggestions. What we did is we picked solo recordings from the Beatles that year, from their solo releases, their singles and their albums, and we put together a Fantasy 1970 album, and I thought it was a lot of fun. So I had so much fun, I thought we would do one today for the year 1971. Okay? So what I wanted to do, here are some of the rules. Rule number one, it had to have been a song that was either recorded or released by one of the four solo Beatles in the year 1971. Two, it had to sound as much as possible like you really think it deserved to be on a Beatle album, or that it sounded like the Beatles. And three, I thought that we would limit it to 14 songs, because in the United Kingdom, where the Beatles were with EMI and their label Parlophone, they had more artistic control than they did in the States with Capitol. And they got to pick what songs were on there. They got to name the titles of the albums. They had more control of what was going on. And normally they had 14 songs, at least up through Revolver in 1966, for the most part. So, Ringo usually got one song per album with the UK versions. George normally got two. And then it would be half and half for Paul and John. What I'm doing in this case is I'm giving Paul 6 and I'm giving John 5. And what I'm going to do is, before I tell you, I'll actually tell you later the order and how the track listing would be for this 1971 Fantasy album, but I'm going to tell you to help you guys pick out some song ideas by telling you what they recorded that year and released. So in 1971 for John, he put out a single called Power to the People, and that was released March of '71. He later put out a solo album in September of that year called Imagine. And Imagine is a nice album, very Beatles sounding, nicely polished, strings and everything. It was co-produced by Phil Spector. Really love it. In fact, some of the songs have their origins when John was still a Beatle. And then later that year in December, he had a single called Happy Christmas, War is Over. Let's go with Paul now. Paul had a song called Another Day with the B-side Oh Woman Oh Why, and that was released in February of '71 with his wife Linda. And then they both had a solo album called Ram, which was released in May of that year. And then Wings was formed, his band, his new band, and they put out a record called Wildlife, and that was released in December of that year. George, while George didn't have any solo albums, what he did have is he had a single called Bangladesh with the B-side Deep Blue, and that was released in July of '71. He also participated in a concert, the Concert for Bangladesh, on August 1st in Madison Square Garden, and he had a lot of his friends that participated too. Bob Dylan, Eric Clapton, Leon Russell, Billy Preston, Ringo Starr, Badfinger, among other friends. And what they did is they came together for a common cause, and that was to let the United States and Europe know about the famine conditions in Bangladesh and try to offer some financial aid if possible. And then Ringo, while he had no solo albums, he did have a single that was released April of '71 called It Don't Come Easy, with the B-side of early 1970. And both of these songs they were written by Ringo, and they dealt with near the end of the Beatles, how he was feeling, and he shed some light onto that, his feelings about it. Alright, so let's start out with this Beatles Fantasy 1971 album. What would be on it? I'm going to start out, this is the track listing of what I'm coming up with. And again, I'd like you guys to give me some feedback or put some of your song ideas. Song number 1, Imagine. This is from John Lennon's Imagine album. I think if there's one song that best represents his Beatles, his post-Beatles work, it would be Imagine. I think most people identify him with that song. I know the Beatles would definitely stand behind, you know, the themes of peace and love and coming together and stopping war. I could see them recording this in a heartbeat. It's such a wonderful song, and it's a nice way to start off the album. The next song is called Bangladesh. That would be song number 2. This is George's song. This is, as they said, rock's first charity single. And it's letting the world know about the famine and the horrific conditions in Bangladesh, and trying to have us, you know, offer some financial aid if we can. I really like it. I could see the Beatles getting behind it. I could see all 4 of them participating in that concert and doing really well. I just really enjoy the song a lot, always have. Song number 3 is called Uncle Albert, Admiral Halsey. This was from Ram, Paul McCartney, and I think if there's one song that best represents like the epitome of the Beatles song from '71, I'd have to pick this song. It sounds like George Martin, their Beatle producer, produced it. It wasn't him though. I remember being in the car as a boy after this came out. I would listen to it in the radio. My parents would have the radio on and I'd say, "Oh, this sounds like the Beatles," or "It is the Beatles," and they would say Paul McCartney. And I just like it. It has some fun to it, like Yellow Submarine, and it's just a great song. It's produced so well. I've always enjoyed it. Song number 4 is going to have some controversy. I know people are going to tell me, "Look, this does not sound, it sounds like the Beatles, but it's not something that they would ever put on there because this is an anti-Paul song." No way. Well, it is a fantasy album, and I'm going with How Do You Sleep from John Lennon's Imagine. It does have George Harrison on there on guitar, and it's meant to sound Sgt. Peppery, that era, deliberately, and it's just a lot of fun. I've always loved it. I think it's just a wonderful track, and to me, I think it belongs on here. Song number 5 is called The Backseat of My Car. This is Paul McCartney from his Ram album. It does have its origins from the Get Back, Let It Be sessions. In fact, there you can hear him at one point rehearsing this song a little bit, you know, to himself as the Beatles are talking, I believe. Wonderful song. I really wish they would have recorded this for Abbey Road. I just love it. It's such a strong, strong song. It's great. Song number 6 is called Give Me Some Truth. This is from John Lennon's Imagine album. Again, it features George Harrison on there, playing a nice guitar and lead guitar. And it had its origins also during the Get Back, Let It Be sessions, and you can hear him, John, rehearsing this song a little bit to himself. Wonderful. Strong track. All right, well, we're down to the last song on the first side of the record. It's called Dear Boy. This is from Paul McCartney and his Ram album. It just sounds like it's a Beatles song, like it belongs on there. I like it. I like how it goes. All right, song number 8. We're going to flip over the album now. We're going to go with Ringo, his entry, early 1970. This is, I think it's kind of a comical song. He is describing the other Beatles as he's singing the song, and he's talking about Paul. What does he say with Paul? He says, Paul lives on a farm. He has no cows, but he has a whole lot of sheep, beep, beep. He's got a new wife. He has kids, and he's asking, you know, if he does come to town, he's asking about this with all the Beatles, you know, would he play with me? And it's just a lot of fun. He's got George Harrison on here also playing guitar, and he does say, when I do come to town, I want to play with all 3. So it's a fun song. I like it. It's a nice little simple tune, and Ringo knows how to deliver those very well. Song number 9 is called Another Day. This was from Paul and Linda, you know, their first single that year, and this again has its roots from the Get Back, Let It Be sessions in '69. You can hear him going on and on rehearsing this song. I like it. I always have. It's just a nice tune, really nice. All right, song number 10 is called Oh My Love. This is a song that nearly made it for the White Album. It's a John Lennon song from Imagine. It features George Harrison on guitar, acoustic guitar, and John is playing piano. Very simple song, but a little more complex than some of his others. like Julia. I just love this song. I love it. It would have been fit nicely on the White Album. I just love it a lot. It's just great. Song number 11 is called Heart of the Country. And this is from Paul McCartney from Ram. You know, this might be one of those things where they might get to a point where, kind of like an Obladi Oblada or Maxwell Silverhammer and the other Beatles, oh, I'm so tired of recording this stuff. You know, but Paul always kind of did his own thing sometimes, and I like the feel of it, and it's just a nice song. Song number 12 is called Deep Blue. This is the B-side to Bangladesh for George Harrison. It's nice. You know, George always did sometimes his stuff sounded like it was Beatles material, you know, when he was with the Beatles, but it was always a little different sometimes. You know, you have songs like Long, Long, Long from the White Album, Blue Jay Way. You'd have For You Blue, just a little different, you know, but not too far off. I like it. I really do. It's a nice tune. Song number 13. We're almost done with this fantasy album. It's called Jealous Guy. This is a song that when the Beatles went to India to do meditation with the Maharishi and learn under him, they went to India in 1968. Well, they got back in May of '68 and they recorded some demos for the White Album. They went to George's house, and this is one of those songs. It had original working title, Child of Nature. And apparently what had happened, the lyrics go something like, I'm a child of nature, one of nature's children. Apparently, the story goes, the Beatles had gone to a lecture from the Maharishi, and he talked about nature. And both John and Paul wrote songs about it. This was John's song, Child of Nature, and Paul wrote Mother Nature's Son. Well, we know how great Mother Nature's Son is. That wound up on the White Album, so I think it would be duplicating the same thing, so they decided not to put it on there. That would be my guess. Later, he changed the lyrics to Jealous Guy, and while he didn't have a hit with it, Roxy Music later did. British group in Europe, and I remember watching the video on MTV. It's just a great song. It's a nice love song. Alright, last song closing the album is called Dear Friend. This is from Wildlife from Wings, from Paul. Nice piano. I love it. It's kind of a little haunting, but I think it's a nice way to close the album. Alright, so what would you call this album? Well, I know this is kind of a throwaway title, but I'm going to name it off a working title for Revolver. It's called Beatles on Safari. That's my idea for it. I think it's a fun title. So if you guys have any ideas, any comments, anything you want to put down, anything you would change, anything you would add, please make sure that you list it below. And I really do greatly appreciate you watching the video, and you have a very nice day. Take care.